Hello, everyone. What is going on? Happy Wednesday. Welcome into this week or today's edition of GC Live with your host, Jack Veltri here. No Kendall Smith today. It's just me. I'm riding solo this afternoon. And what's up, guys? What's up? Hope you guys are all doing well. And like I said, it's just me today, myself, Jack Veltri, and Big Red says, Jack, what's up, Big Red? Appreciate you always tuning in. Yeah, like I said, Kendall's pretty busy today, so she obviously, does a lot of work. It's crazy how much she does, but it's just gonna be me today, and then for those of you watching on Sunday Reset with myself, I am planning to have Kendall on as a guest that day. So you'll get a dose of Kendall again this week. It will probably be on Sunday though. So just me, but hope you guys are all doing well. Appreciate you tuning in. And yeah, let's we got a lot to talk about today. We heard from South Carolina coordinators today, so Clayton White and Dowell Loggains, and they shared some thoughts on Ole Miss and what this team can really be like and stuff. And Ole Miss is going to be a tough opponent for South Carolina, but obviously the loss to Kentucky kind of changes things a little bit in the fact that they have some weaknesses, right? So they're not, bulletproof, I guess, per se. They are vulnerable. So Big Red asks, does the 3:30 game time make a difference in how we play? No, I don't think so. I think obviously if this were a night game, the energy would probably be I think it's fair to say the energy would probably be a little more intense, a little bit louder, a little bit more insane, crazy. The environment would be nuts. But I still think for a 3:30 game, it's going to be crazy. I mean, we saw what happened with the LSU game, how loud and wild it was for a noon kick. So I have no reason to believe that it's not going to be electric on Saturday afternoon. But before we get into talking all about what Dowell and Clayton had to say today, I want to talk to you guys about the sponsor right above me here, Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. If you're looking to buy a home or you need help with your mortgage, anything like that, any housing needs that you do have, give our guy Clint a call. He's been in the mortgage industry since 2003, which allows him to help everyone from the first-time home buyers to the complex and complicated jumbo buyers. So Clint has been a longtime supporter of Gamecock Central. He's a lifelong Gamecock fan. We appreciate everything he does. So if you're interested in reaching out to Clint to start the process of him helping you out, you can give a call to the number above, 803-422-6797. The NMLS number for him is 71597, or you can go to clinthammond.com. And again, all that info will be right above me here on screen throughout the entire show. And we appreciate Clint for all his support over the years. So we got some questions here before we get into what the coordinators had to say. Michael Lynn says, I thought it was interesting how they have a team to replicate the Ole Miss offense. I think we will handle the tempo well. And yeah, that'll be one of the points we get into talking about here soon, because Clayton was talking about that a little bit earlier today. And yeah, I mean, Ole Miss runs a quick offense, right? I mean, that Kentucky game, the Wildcats controlled the time possession. I mean, they had the ball for 40 minutes in that game. Ole Miss only had for 20. Now, you look at the numbers and say, oh, wow, Kentucky's defense did a really good job of keeping Ole Miss off the field. There's a lot of truth to that. But at the same time, when you run a tempo offense, you're not going to be on the field for as long. And so a lot of Ole Miss's drives, I mean, I'm going to look at the numbers here, but the only drive they had that went 10 plays or more came in the third quarter, right? I think it was the first drive of the third quarter. That was the only 10-play drive or more, and everything else was 6 plays, 8 plays, 3 plays, 2 plays in some cases. I mean, it was a lot of long drives, but in shorter amount of plays, and Kentucky's defense really stepped up to the task and played well. So I'll be interested to see how Carolina handles the tempo on Saturday, though I think they'll be fine, in my opinion. Let's see. Do we have anyone who can lock Juice Wells down? Does it even matter if we can get to the QB effectively? Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Big Red, because again, and I'll say this a lot today, this is something that was brought up today in the press conference by Clayton. Carolina needs to create pressure in this game, right? If you can get to Dart, we saw what happened last week against Kentucky. He had 4 sacks. He really, from what I watched, he looked very, trying to think of the right word here, but he didn't look like himself at times in the pocket. I guess is the best way to say it, right? He looked, fuzzled out there, just a little bit, all over the place at times. And I mean, look, I was talking to one of the guys over from the Ole Miss on 3 site, and I'm gonna have a story out tomorrow. I usually do, if you guys know, with SEC games, I'll do a Q&A with one of the opposing writers every week. So that'll come out tomorrow afternoon at some point. But I was asking him, like, what do you need to see improve this week? And that's a really broad question, but offensive line was number one for him. And Ole Miss's offensive line didn't do a good job protecting Dart last week, and we saw what happened in that game. South Carolina's got a good defense. Can they get to the quarterback? Can they make him have some tough throws? I think that's what it really comes down to. It's not so much about who can guard Juice. I mean, we've seen South Carolina's secondary is going to be tested in this game, no doubt. But I mean, the big worry is, okay, who's guarding Trey Harris, right? But I don't think it matters as much if you're really creating pressure on the quarterback and making life pretty much hell back there. Bigger test: stop Dart running or passing. I would say passing. And let's pull up the first clip here. We'll go a little bit in reverse order. Normally in these videos, I'll go Dowell first and then Clayton second. Let's go with Clayton first. I feel like that's kind of where we're at right now. Here's what Clayton White had to say about Jackson Dart and the type of player he is and who he basically compared him to.
He does have a nice skill set. I think they do a really good job of him using his mobility. Obviously, he's very mobile in the pocket, but I do think they have a very selective quarterback run game for him that makes him very difficult to defend. I think that his skill set is, you can similar say it's more of, if you want a big picture, almost like a Josh Allen type of quarterback, a quarterback who can throw and run, can beat you with his feet, can throw for a lot of yards and touchdowns, and he definitely can beat you with his feet just like Josh Allen.
Yeah, so that is what Clayton White had to say about Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart. And look, he's one of the best quarterbacks in college football, obviously. I mean, look, even despite the Rebels losing on Saturday, I mean, this is a guy that's completed 77% of his passes so far this year, 13 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Now I know, before you even mention it, I do know that Ole Miss has not played a tough schedule by any means. Georgia Southern, Wake Forest, Middle Tennessee State, and Furman. No disrespect to any of those teams, but they don't exactly make me, fear what, is going to happen, right? Ole Miss dominated those teams, and that should have been the case, and they did. Again, against Kentucky, he went 18-27 passing, 261 yards. That's nothing to really, be down about, but he only completed 67 or 66% of his passes, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, the 4 sacks. He did run a little bit on the ground, and he's ran a little bit this season, but not like anything like a Jalen Milroe type. And I will say Clayton's comparison to Josh Allen, shout out my quarterback right there, my future MVP of the Buffalo Bills right there. But I mean, the point is, Dart is, for all intents and purposes, kind of a bigger quarterback. He's 6'2", 225. He's a veteran at this point in this Ole Miss offense. He's going to be one of those guys that he needs to have a good game on Saturday for the Rebels to win. And this is a guy that's probably going to end up being in the Heisman race down to the wire, I would imagine. And so, I mean, look, he's a very good quarterback. I guess going back to the question from earlier, what's the bigger test, stopping him running or throwing? I think you got to stop him in the air. If you can create pressure in the pocket, I think you live with what happens on the ground. If he runs a little bit, okay. But at least, like, the big thing is you got to prevent the connections in that receiver room. I mean, it's not just Juice Wells. It's obviously Trey Harris, who's far and away their leading receiver this season. And he's going to create a lot of problems out there at receiver going up against the South Carolina secondary. But if you can make life tougher in the pocket on Dart, I feel good about what South Carolina can really do in that secondary there. And Michael Lynn says, Fortune on Harris and Kilgore on Juice. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's probably your best bet on Saturday, and then you kind of live with what happens from there and make adjustments as needed. Craig says, I wonder if we play Vakari Swain more this game to have an extra corner type guy covering the slot or to stay with Kilgore. Yeah, I'm interested to see what happens too. Obviously, it's going to be Odie Fortune and Kilgore and guys like that out there, Nicky Manwari, DQ Smith. I wonder if – I think we saw this in the Kentucky game where Vakari came in, had that sack. bringing pressure on Brock Vandegrift. I wonder if we see more stuff like that. I wonder if we go back to the LSU game, and we're going to try not to bring that game up much, but, with the defense, the big point of contention was the fact that Carolina seemingly switched from a 4-man front to a 3-man front to allow more guys in coverage. And I wonder if that's kind of where you see a little bit more of a card. But I think South Carolina is going to be doing a lot of rotating in general, just because of the tempo Ole Miss plays with. And speaking of tempo, here is what Clayton White briefly said about the tempo and how South Carolina's kind of preparing for it this week.
That system has been very productive over the years, and we do our best to try to mimic it during practice and make sure our guys understand communication and getting lined up and lining up fast and eyes to the sideline and getting calls in. And it's very, very important every single week, but obviously when you're playing a tempo team, it's a little bit more important to make sure we're on the same page as fast as we possibly can.
So that's what Clayton White had to say about the tempo and how South Carolina is kind of preparing for it. Keep in mind, I mean, you go back to the Old Dominion game at the start of the year. I mean, Old Dominion kind of runs an offense similar to Tennessee. If you know anything about the Vols, they like to run, move quick. And that's kind of what South Carolina saw in that game, if I'm not mistaken. And with this Ole Miss team, it's going to be very similar to that. I'm going to try to get to all your questions that you have for me today. So be sure to drop any questions you have in the comments here. But Michael says, will it be harder for the defense to substitute guys in and out as much as they usually do? I could see that being something that to keep an eye on for Saturday. I don't know if it'll be an issue. It's definitely going to be harder, though, because Ole Miss, if they move as quickly as they want to, I mean, you can't just be, here's DeAndre Jules jogging in from the sideline to the field, and here's Boogie Huntley coming out. Like, you normally in a slower paced team, you can rotate whoever you want in there and out. It doesn't really matter. But the problem with an up tempo team is you run the risk of potentially getting 12 men on the field and stuff if a guy doesn't get onto the sideline quick enough. So, and it's also tough when you're just running play after play after play, and it's it's exhausting on the defensive end. But I think Carolina's prepared for it well. It seems from what we have heard all week. It seems like they're going to be ready for it, and they have to be because this Ole Miss, offense is going to try to fire away, and they're going to be coming in here playing pissed off. I mean, let's make no mistake about it. Despite how rough things looked at times and how bad that loss is for Ole Miss in the grand scheme of things to Kentucky, they're going to come in here looking for, I wouldn't say revenge because it's like what rivalry do they have with South Carolina, but more so like redemption in terms of like getting right back on track. Basically is what I'm getting at. And, just because they lost to Kentucky doesn't erase the fact that this is still very much a college football playoff team as we sit here right now on what's today's date? October 2nd. So, this is a Rebel team that has a lot of big games coming up. They can't afford to lose this one. And I do expect Ole Miss to come out here playing, guns a-blazing, doing whatever they got to do on offense to get this going. And for South Carolina's defense, they got to be able to be ready to meet that match. And Kyle says Kentucky was able to sustain drives and keep the ball away from Ole Miss. That will be a key. And like I said before, Ole Miss runs that tempo offense. So the numbers, the 40 minutes to a 20-minute time of possession in that game don't really tell the whole picture because Ole Miss, again, they don't need to use a ton of the clock. If they're moving down the field in 6-7 plays and they're scoring in 2 minutes, but who cares? I mean, it's like that's the thing. But in a game like this, yeah, you totally want to keep the ball out of their hands as long as possible. For South Carolina, I mean, they don't run a tempo offense like Ole Miss at all. Nothing similar to it at all. I think for Carolina, it depends on who's healthy, obviously, and we'll get to that in a little bit here. But I think they really need to have a good game plan offensively, and got to make sure you keep Dart and those guys in check. I think that's really what it comes down to. And Craig comments again and says we got to be much better on first down. Don't be so damn predictable. Absolutely. I mean, you gotta whatever worked over these last few weeks, you gotta do it. Like the run game's got to continue to be good. Will Rocket Sanders be available? We'll see. The availability report for the SEC, the first one of the week, comes out later tonight at some point. So we'll have that posted on GamecockCentral.com whenever that does become available. But I would expect to see guys like Sellers, Rocket, Jared Brown, guys, whoever was basically out. I'd be surprised if none of them are on it, but it wouldn't shock me if they're listed as like questionable or something. I'm not insinuating anything. I'm just keeping reality here that, why reveal already that they're good to go? You know what I mean? Like, make it tougher on Ole Miss to prepare and going into this game. But totally agree. They got to be much better on first down here. Big Red comments. Can we throw on Ole Miss consistently, or will we continue to run the ball predominantly? I think you're going to have this. It depends on, like I said, it depends on who's out there. If it's Lenore Sellers at quarterback, I think you can really run whatever you want with him. Might take a series or two to get it going just because he hasn't played since that LSU game. But I do think Carolina is going to run the ball a lot in this game. But it also depends, like I said, on who's available. Is Rocket Sanders going to be out there? If it's Oscar Attaway leading the way and the other running backs, I would think Carolina passes the ball a little bit more. But it really just depends on your personnel out there. And it wouldn't surprise me if they run the ball like they have been. I mean, that's kind of been their forte, their bread and butter so far this year. So getting into some of the other stuff Clayton White had to say before we get into what Dowell Loggains had to say. Like I said before, the tempo this year for Ole Miss has been very, high-paced and stuff. He did say Kentucky's game plan worked to perfection in keeping Ole Miss off the field. They did a really good job of tackling, too, which helped, obviously. And so that's something South Carolina's going to have to do. I know that was a struggle in the LSU game, was making tackles because he missed 17 of them. You got to be better in those situations this year. And, if one guy misses a tackle, 2 or 3 guys better be behind him, ready to make a play. And, he basically said it today with Jackson Dart. I mean, the quicker South Carolina gets to him, the more time they're going to have to make a play in coverage. And, Ole Miss can beat short passes, long passes. They also do a pretty good job making, defenses miss. So, look, this seems like a really good offense, all things considered. But I definitely think Carolina's going to have their work cut out for them, and they got to be able to make some plays. And speaking of this Ole Miss offense, obviously Jackson Dart, Juice Wells are the main two that a lot of people are going to look at in this game and talk about. But I really urge you guys to look at what Trey Harris has done this year. And I'll read out the numbers. 49 catches, 804 yards, 16.5 yards per catch. He's got a long of 70 this year and 5 touchdowns. He is far and away the number one receiver on this team. Juice Wells' perspective in terms of stats, he's receiver number 3 on this team. Caden Lee is number 2 right now with 16 catches for 275 yards. So far and away, they love targeting Trey Harris when they can. I mean, you look at his stats, he had 11 catches against Kentucky for 176 yards and a touchdown. And then against Georgia Southern, 11 catches for 225 yards and 2 touchdowns. And against Wake Forest, 10 catches for 94 yards. So basically, he's averaging roughly about 10 catches per game this season. And he is going to be a very tough player to stop in this offense. I don't know if South Carolina is going to be able to stop him completely. But again, for reference, I mean, he had 15 targets against Kentucky and caught 11 of them. And, Kentucky still won the game despite all the good things he did at receiver. And you look at what the rest of that offense did in the receiving game. Parrish had 3 catches for 18 yards. Lee only had 2 catches for 19 yards. Prescorn had 1 catch for 42 yards. Matt Jones had 1 catch for 6 yards. And obviously, as many of you know, Juice Wells did not have a single catch in the game. 2 targets, 1 drop. So the point is, I don't know if you're going to be able to limit what Trey Harris can do. He's just a really good ball player, and he's going to be, I would assume, a first-round pick in the NFL draft whenever he does decide to turn pro. But again, and you have to do your best to take Harris out of the game is what I'm getting at. Like, it's easier said than done. But if you limit him, kind of think of it like, you guys remember when Tennessee came into town 2 years ago and all the talk was about Jalen Hyatt, now who's with the Giants and stuff, how good he is and how no one's been able to stop him and all this and that. And then I think it was like Marcellus Dowell, and excuse me if I'm wrong on who covered him, but the point is Jalen Hyatt was pretty much taken out of that game by being locked up. So I think that's what I'm getting at here is the fact that, like, I'm not saying Trey Harris is Jalen Hyatt or Jalen Hyatt is Trey Harris, but you got to be able to do your best to take the top guy out of the game and make him not effective. But like I said before, it's easier said than done. Here's what I asked Clayton White about Trey Harris today and how you go about Do you put more attention on trying to cover him, or do you kind of just game plan the same way you would with any receiver? Here's what he had to say about that.
It's kind of you have to do both a little bit. And obviously, we look at targets, we look at all those things to try to figure out, some quarterbacks' favorites, and obviously they have a nice group of receivers that can make plays. So you really can't, tilt your hand one way or the other. It's like robbing Peter to pay Paul. So you don't want to get caught in that situation.
Yeah, so that's what Clayton White had to say, answering my question about Trey Harris, that Ole Miss offense. And again, he's far and away the best receiver, on this Rebel team, and he might be one of the best receivers in the country. Admittedly, I mean, he's 6'3", 210. Very good player. I mean, look, he was at Louisiana Tech for 3 years. He came to Ole Miss last year, had 54 catches, which is a lot, and he had 985 yards through the air. But, I mean, look, he's already, through 4 games. And look, I know Ole Miss has played cupcake opponents for the most part. He is, really going to set himself up for a nice payday after this year whenever he goes to the NFL. He is a really good player, and it helps that Jackson Dart has been throwing the ball pretty well to him. So going to have to keep an eye on that guy. He is going to be outstanding. In the run game with Ole Miss, they don't have Quinshon Judkins anymore. I feel like if they had him, and if he didn't go to Ohio State, things might be a little different right now. You look at Henry Parrish Jr., their lead running back. He's got 70 carries for 489 yards, 8 touchdowns. He is going to be the number one guy to stop in the run game, probably besides Jackson Dart. Although, Dart, I feel like he's only got 36 carries for 112 yards this season and 3 touchdowns, and his longest run 17 yards. So I feel like Parrish and Matt Jones, those are going to be the 2 key guys to stop on the ground. And, we go back to the LSU game, for instance. LSU hadn't been able to run the ball at all much at that point, but they figured it out and had a great game running the football. So if Carolina has a game like that again, where the receivers are making good plays here and there, like a Kyron Lacey, guys like that, then you might be in some trouble where you can't stop the run game and you can't stop the pass game from time to time. But I do think this defense is going to give South Carolina more than enough of a chance to win the game. It just really comes down to what happens on the offensive side of the ball, which is now where we're going to flip into that part of the conversation. But before we do, wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about our friends over at PrizePicks. So let me get this comment off screen here. And he's no Ryan Williams. Yeah, Ryan Williams is really good. Anyway, PrizePicks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in all of North America. They're the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 players' stat projections. And then, of course, watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks has quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. It's what makes PrizePicks the number one daily fantasy sports app. I personally have had a lot of experience using PrizePicks over the years. It is the number one way for me to go in terms of stuff like this with sports and having fun in that way. So I can definitely recommend it. Like I said, they got it's not just college football; it's NFL, it's NBA is going to start heating up soon. I know NHL's around the corner. Obviously, if you pay attention to Major League Baseball, there's a playoff game going on right now with the Tigers and Astros, and obviously the rest of the day we got MLB playoffs going on, and then that'll carry out until the World Series in late October. So just go to PrizePicks.com or download the PrizePicks app. Use the code GC, that stands for Gamecock Central, to receive a guaranteed $50 once you play $5 in lineups. And really appreciate PrizePicks for being a great sponsor of our GC Live shows. And so that was PrizePicks there. Now let's get into this Ole Miss offense a little bit. Before we get into that, Craig says, agree, I think Juice will scorch Kilgore. That's why I'd put Vicari Swain on him. Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. I trust that Jalen Kilgore is going to play a good game on Saturday. Again, we don't know how effective Juice Wells is going to be. I have a feeling, it's just a gut feeling, because we've seen what former Gamecocks do to South Carolina in these redemption, revenge games, whatever you want to call them, the first time back playing against your old team. We saw it with Michael Braswell in LSU in the SEC tournament against South Carolina in baseball, where he had the walk-off hit, or I'm sorry, the go-ahead hit that made the difference in that tournament. And then, Jermaine Couisnard, how could you forget? Oregon Duck lighting the world on fire against South Carolina in the first round of March Madness. So, football's the one sport where it hasn't happened yet. Is this the time where it does? I'm curious to see, because this definitely has been the year of former Gamecocks playing well against South Carolina. And is the kicking game going to be a big factor in this game? Of course. When wouldn't it be, is my point on this. I think Alex Herrera's looked good this year for South Carolina. Ole Miss has got a pretty good kicker as well. Looking at some of his numbers here, Caden Davis is 30 of 31 on extra points. He's 7 of 9 on field goal tries. And so he's 0 of 1 from 50 this year. So his long on the year is 42. I wonder how long Lane Kiffin is going to try to, kick a field goal from. I think they're going to be going for on fourth down a good bit in this game. We'll have to see. You go back to last week. I mean, Ole Miss went 1 of 10 on third downs, but went 2 for 2 on fourth down. So it wouldn't be shocking if they try going for on fourth downs in this game. But then again, they have a penalty issue as well. They're one of the most penalized teams in the country, and they had 8 penalties for 53 yards last week. So the point is, South Carolina, Ole Miss, this game is going to come down to a lot of factors. Kicking might be a big factor in this game, but I think Alex Herrera probably wins that battle against Caden Davis in the kicking game. So without further ado, let's flip it over to what Dowell Loggains had to say. Here's what he had to say, actually, on Ole Miss's offense. And because obviously he's heard about the Rebels and what they do. I mean, it's hard not to hear about them, but here's what he had to say about them and kind of what South Carolina needs to do.
I don't know what's going on with their offense. I just know that they're very good. I'm not dumb. I hear things and see things, and we get them some crossover tape. So we obviously know what's going on the other side. But for our side, it's do your job and execute and win your one-on-one matchups. And it is important. It is important to be able to convert third downs. It's an area we need to improve on. We haven't been good enough this season. It's continue to run the ball well. It's continue to create explosive plays and minimize the turnovers. Like, you can't give these guys short fields, and you need to convert third downs. You need to be able to run the ball well. And the other thing Kentucky did is they hit some explosive plays that you're going to have to do, and they won some one-on-one matchups. And so that element is always a huge challenge, but you're talking about playing company football in all 3 phases, and that becomes a bigger issue every week in this conference.
So that is what Dowell Loggains had to say about Ole Miss's offense and kind of what Carolina needs to do on their end to, have a good game. And Big Red brings up a question. If you guys have any questions you want to ask about South Carolina's offense now, now's the perfect time to do so as we are moving on into this Gamecock offense. And Big Red said, are we possibly going to rotate QBs to keep Ole Miss on their toes? It wouldn't shock me. Let's say Lenore Sellers is available and he is starting in the game, because obviously he's their quarterback. He is there. I mean, Dowell Loggains solidified it today. Not that anyone had any question about it, but Sellers is the guy. That's clear as day, despite how well Robbie Ashford played. It would surprise me if we don't see maybe a few more packages specifically designed for Robbie Ashford to come in and play in this game. He obviously brings a nice dynamic as a runner, and I think we've said it all since the preseason. Like, Carolina has always seemingly had something in mind for Robbie Ashford. I mean, they've talked about before. I mean, using him in goal line situations, maybe fourth and short. I mean, when you need the extra yardages, I think Robbie Ashford could be that guy, but he can also throw it. So wouldn't surprise me if we see him in there a little bit. But I think this is Lenore's Sellers game. So with Loggains today, he did talk about the sacks, because that was the first question he got. Obviously, Carolina has struggled in that department, just like last year. 16 sacks on the year through 4 games. Not good enough. It's essentially, when you divide it up, it's 4 sacks a game, and it's a real concern. Just like Ole Miss with Dart getting sacked a bunch, but he did say most of the sacks have been coming on third down, and to kind of go ahead and correct it, you need to go back and watch what happened. Essentially, is what he said. You evaluate every position on those plays: quarterback, wide receiver. Are the receivers getting open? Is the offensive line blocking? Are the tight ends doing their job? And then you work to correct it. And look, it's not just the offensive line in these situations. I think a lot of people are going to look at the sacks and mainly attribute it to the fact that the offensive line stinks again. I don't think that's fully the case. I think it's just a lazy take, in my opinion. Go back and watch some of these sacks. You'll see tight ends like Michael Smith and Josh Simon missing blocks. you'll see, LSU, for instance. Some of those sacks are definitely on the quarterbacks. At the same time, on the offensive line too. But I will say there were times where LSU brought, I can't think of how many guys, but definitely more than 5 offensive linemen and a running back can handle. So that's when, South Carolina couldn't really do much about it. Now, against Akron, I'd be, I'd wager to say most of those sacks were on the offensive line, just not blocking well enough. And so I definitely think that is something that needs to improve. Big Red asks, which side are the sacks coming from, or is it a youth issue or something else entirely? When I watch back on some of these sacks, it seems like you're watching the game and, you see where I think it's Casey Henry over at right tackle. And that's not saying it's on him, but a lot of the sacks seem to come from the right side of the offensive line. But then again, they really come from everywhere. But from what I've noticed, a lot of them have come up the middle. It's come, right, left. I mean, honestly, it's really come everywhere. So I don't really know what I'm saying there. But I don't think it's a youth issue. I just think it's a lack of blocking. A lot of times these guys actually make decent enough blocks. It's just they're not holding them long enough. And then you see, the quarterback taking too much time in the pocket and he gets swallowed up. So it's a lot of everything. It's not really a youth issue, in my opinion. This is definitely a veteran offensive line. I think it's just a lot of problems going on and not everyone doing their job. And that needs to change. And, I agree with what Dowell said, is the fact that they're coming on third downs. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Looking at what else he had to say, he likes, all 5 of his quarterbacks. I think the question was, how has Lenoris and Robbie progressed this week? And he kind of made a joking answer saying that he likes all 5 of his quarterbacks, but he's proud of the way Robbie Ashford has played, specifically against Akron in that start. He did his job. He's excited about the way that him and Sellers have both played. Obviously Lenoris is going to be the guy going forward as long as he's healthy. But, they expected Robbie to play the way he did. And same deal with Davis Bevel. So they've got some good options at quarterback, like I've said many times before. But, again, I think Sellers is your guy, and this offense revolves around him. And I think you're a little bit more dynamic in the run game and the pass game with Sellers compared to Ashford. And, look, you can say what you want, but, I mean, it's Akron that Robbie Ashford was playing. He did very well, but it's Akron. Ole Miss is going to be a different beast if he ever has to play. Again, the season, Alabama, Oklahoma. If he has to ever suit up again this year, I mean, outside of Wofford, the games on the schedule are pretty tough. So I'll be interested to see, for one, can Lenoir stay healthy? And number 2, if Robbie Ashford has to ever play again, how does he look? That's kind of the main thing. Christopher says, is Rocket Sanders and Sellers ready to go? I don't like how coaches act like it's a big secret. Just tell the fan base, are they good to go or not? I kind of wish that was the case. It sounds so much nicer than dealing with the availability report and keeping everything so secretive. Here, I'll justify why they probably keep it secret. Is why would you want to give away? Think about it from I'll think about it from Ole Miss's perspective. Let's say Jackson Dart is hurt, and it's only Ole Miss knows about it. Why would you want to reveal that to South Carolina? Like, why would you tell them, like, hey, Jackson, like Lane Kiffin calls Shane Beamer, hey Shane, it's Lane here. Jackson Dart isn't going to play on Saturday. Thanks, bye. Like, why would you ever say that? Yeah, it gives you the other team an advantage. Whereas this week, who knows what South Carolina's offense is going to look like until Saturday. Ole Miss has got to prepare for everything. And it's the same way for South Carolina preparing for everything Ole Miss is going to give them. So I would say, to answer the question here, and look, we'll see on the availability report tonight what happens, but over the next few days, and I totally agree that I wish it was just, hey, like these guys are good to go and they'll be playing on Saturday. Like I wish it was that simple, but it's not. And I would be willing to bet Lenoris is going to be good to go for Saturday. Rocket seems to be, I don't know. Rocket has been practicing, just like Sellers, just like Jared Brown. I'll give it the simple answer. I think they're all going to play. So we'll see what happens. Big Red says, I wish we could have a 2-back setup to give Sellers and Ashford more time, or maybe one more blocker. Yeah, that'd be nice. But I do think at the same time, running backs that are in there, and I think this is talking about stacks and stuff, and to give them more time, obviously, the blocking has to be better. I've seen a lot of poor blocking from the running backs this year. I think Rocket Sanders missed a block in the LSU game that led to a sack. I'm trying to think of other instances, but there's been times this year where the running back blocking, the tight end blocking, the offensive line blocking hasn't been good. And Christopher says, I think they should do a two QB play with triple option. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Just don't be like the Buffalo Bills and Joe Brady and put, Lenora Sellers on the, on the far sideline at wide receiver and have, Rocket Sanders lining up at Wildcat quarterback. Don't do that. But I would agree with the fact of maybe run a 2 QB play with triple option. I don't know. They do run triple option at this point, South Carolina. And, triple option, I've never really seen a time, at least I can't think of, where you've had 2 quarterbacks in there. Maybe I'm mistaken. You guys can share what you know. But, I mean, it's always been a quarterback and 2 running backs. So it wouldn't shock me if that's the case, but we'll have to see. And here is what we'll get into a little bit of what Dowell Loggains had to say about Ole Miss's defense. Here's what he had to say on that.
They're an aggressive group. The front seven's really good. It's as talented as any group that we're going to face. And I think after the Kentucky game, I told you guys that defense at Kentucky was really good and really well coached, and got a ton of respect for Brad White. Some AD needs to hire him and get him out of the conference. But this is another huge challenge. The front, obviously, we're not doing some things offensively. Protection, those things that we're going to have to work on. We're going to face an extremely talented front that's done a good job in recruiting, done a very good job in the transfer portal. These guys play hard. And the thing for those guys is they play complementary football in a different way than we play it. They play with a lot of leads. They've got a really explosive offense. So when you're playing with a lead, you get to rush the passer. It's almost like I go back to my days in Tennessee when we played the Colts, and they got Freeney and Mathis, and they got those 2 wideouts and Peyton Manning, and all of a sudden it's 14-0, and those guys get to pin their ears back and rush. And I thought Kentucky did a great job trying to play complementary football that way. But these guys play complementary football a different way, and they've married their 3 phases together very well.
So that's what Dowell Loggains had to say about Ole Miss in general, more so the defense and, how good of a complementary football team they are, right? I mean, look, their defense did fine enough against Kentucky. I think let's not forget Kentucky won this game on a fumbled ball that so happened to land in the hands of one of the Wildcat players in the end zone. So it is very possible that, if Ole Miss comes out with that fumble there, it's a win for the Rebels, and we're not even talking about Kentucky pulling off an upset. But I will say, going back and looking at the numbers here, Kentucky did a pretty good job on offense in that 40-minute span. 336 total yards, 243 passing, 93 rushing yards, only 3 penalties. And to really put into perspective, Brock Vandegrift, who we all remember did nothing against South Carolina. He looked like a rag doll being thrown around out there. 18 completions, I should say, for 243 yards and a touchdown. He looked very solid out there. It looked like a completely different ball player compared to what he was against South Carolina. And look, I also want to, erase the perception that just because Kentucky beat Ole Miss does not mean South Carolina is going to. I mean, I think they definitely can for sure, but it's not do the same things Kentucky did and you'll win. Obviously, you need to play good defense, play good offense, and all that stuff. At the same time, it's not a one-to-one copy because these are 2 different teams we're talking about here. Kentucky and South Carolina may be similar in some ways, but a lot of ways they're different. So I know people are going to say that, transit property here basically, because South Carolina beat Kentucky means they could beat Ole Miss. It's not necessarily the case. Ole Miss is going to be coming in here playing fired up. South Carolina needs to as well. And I expect Ole Miss to play much differently than they did last week. It's just up to South Carolina to kind of match it. But kind of talking about this Ole Miss defense again, I mean, look, Kentucky really found the blueprint as to how to exploit this defense a little bit. I think Ole Miss has got some flaws. Defensively, I don't think they're amazing by any means. They did force 1 turnover, but other than that, it's been, nothing too crazy to write home about. I mean, they did get 5 sacks on defense, but and 10 tackles for loss. But I think Carolina should be able to, match well up against this, Ole Miss defense, in my opinion. But we'll have to see what happens. Big Red says, who's our go-to receiver? Is Nick Harbor coming along well enough with timing to be a legitimate factor on the offense? All right. I'm going to just be quite frank and honest. You may not like it, but it's, got to be honest sometimes. Nick Harbor is a great athlete, and he is very fast, very quick. He's a real weapon in college football 25. I don't think no disrespect, I think he's a good player and stuff. He hasn't come along the way you would hope. And he really hasn't been a factor in this offense this year. And I truly do not know when he's going to be. I don't expect him to this weekend. Ole Miss is like I said, they've got a defense that can make some plays out there. And look, I mean, at this point, he's only got 4 catches for 35 yards. And I know everyone wants to see him run a go route and, jet sweep this, jet sweep that, but it's not exactly as easy as it sounds. It's not the video game. And I think the video game has not helped in any way. It's heightened people's perception of, what Nick Harbor is going to be. And it just hasn't worked that way this year. He's, obviously his ball catching still seems to be somewhat of an issue. It's all about creating separation too and creating space. And then you got to catch the ball. I think he had 1 catch this year that was, right to him, and he, kind of bobbled the ball a little bit. So he's got a lot of work to do. I would honestly say right now, they're probably I'll go off the list here. I would put these receivers ahead of him right now. Mazeo Bennett, Jared Brown, Vandrevius Jacobs, Josh Simon, Gage Larverdane, Michael Smith. I'd even put Dale Von Campbell ahead of him. That's just a lot of guys that I think are ahead of Nick Harbor right now in this offense. And look, every week the question gets asked to Shane or Dowell or myself, whoever is talking about South Carolina. It's always, when's Nick Harbor going to get involved? When's Nick Harbor going to do this? When's he going to do that? I hate to say it, but I just don't know when that's going to happen because it hasn't happened yet. He had the 1 game last year against Texas A&M where he played fairly well. I think was South Carolina's leading receiver that day in College Station. But so far this year, it just hasn't worked to the way maybe you want it to. And here's a good comparison. Michael Lynn says it's okay. It took Xavier Legette 3 years. And that's a good point. But I think these are 2 different guys because look at it this way. Xavier Legette is a wide receiver. Not saying Nick Harbor isn't. But again, I bring up the point. Nick Harbor is a 5-star athlete. Again, 5-star athlete, not a 5-star wide receiver. Played a lot of defense in high school. Obviously, he made the switch over to receiver at Carolina, and it's taken a lot of time to get this thing down. Now, I wonder, okay, if he stays around next year, because, God forbid he transfers or something, what happens next year, right? And I don't even want to start talking about next year yet because we got to talk about this game. But it's like with Nick Harbor, what is he going to look like next year, right? I think that's the key in all of this, but I just don't know when he's going to be clicking this year. I think it all takes one play to really change what I'm saying here, but I haven't seen anything so far to make me think that he's going to be a real legitimate threat in this offense yet. It hasn't happened yet. I don't expect it to anytime soon. But to kind of get back to the question of who's the go-to wide receiver, I think it's got to be Mazeo Bennett, right? 11 catches, 159 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's been very good in this offense so far this year. Jared Brown missed the Akron game, and that kind of lended itself well to Mazeo playing well. He caught all 5 of his targets, had the big touchdown from Robbie Ashford. He's played very well. I don't think there's been one guy in particular that's like far and away like the best receiver in this offense. But if I had to pick 1 or 2 guys, it's probably Mazeo Bennett and Jared Brown because the rest of these guys, Josh Simon only has 6 catches for 83 yards. Gage Larverdane had 2 catches against Akron for 79 yards. That's been it for him this year. Michael Smith has caught 6 passes. Like I said before, Nick Harbor, only 4 catches. Dale Von Campbell, 2 catches. So I guess what I'm getting at here is, Carolina's got some options at receiver, but, who is going to be that guy that really steps up? And I'm waiting for, not saying Mazeo Bennett hasn't been great. He's been awesome this year, but I'm waiting for that moment where it's like, I can confidently say, this guy's got kind of like Trey Harris with Ole Miss. I'm not saying someone on South Carolina is going to have 46 catches through this time of the year, but I'm expecting someone to kind of start stepping up here soon and make it clear, hey, I'm the top dog at receiver, and I'm going to be the reliable target. I think that could be Mazeo Bennett, to be honest, and wouldn't surprise me if it wasn't. So, or if he wasn't, I'm saying. So anyway, I think with this offense, look, they've got their work cut out for them this weekend. We'll see who's available, see who's healthy. I think Lenore Sellers showed a lot of progress in that LSU game. I mean, we are quick to forget that South Carolina did have 24 points at the end of the first half, and that is without the pick six that got wiped off the board there on the horse collar tackle. So that was all the offense, and they did really well in that game. Second half is a little bit of a different story, but I would be willing to bet if Sellers doesn't get hurt in that game, South Carolina's 4-0 right now, and probably ranked right now, and looking a lot towards maybe going 5-0. But I do think as long as he's healthy, I think South Carolina has a legitimate chance to win this game. And you also need, speaking of Rocket Sanders, Sanders is not healthy enough to be effective on Saturday. At least as of the presser yesterday, that was the case. I'm not sure what you heard from that. How did you get that from the presser? Huh? Like Beamer didn't say that Sanders isn't healthy. I mean, he said he practiced. He's going to continue to practice every day. He didn't reveal any info that would make me or anyone here feel like, oh, Rocket Sanders isn't going to play on Saturday. Like, I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration. Just plan on Sellers not playing much. I mean, what? I mean, probably lose. I mean, yeah. I mean, if those guys don't play, I would say it'd be tougher for South Carolina to win. But I think they're going to play. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball that can tell you one way or the other. But I mean, look, they've had a few weeks to get healthy. I think they're going to be playing on Saturday, and so I disagree with the fact that just rule them out already. But we'll have to see. And are you talking about Shane here saying like Sanders would be healthy, like more forthcoming? He doesn't have to reveal anything though. At the same time, it's like he kind of got asked yesterday about these guys, and the cat kind of got out of the bag a little bit. Not really, but he doesn't have to reveal anything on an SEC week with the injury report. Like that is, get all your details from there. Essentially, he didn't have to say anything yesterday. Of course, he did, but there's nothing in there that, from what Shane said, that made me feel like, oh, like these guys are not playing. South Carolina's going to lose. It'll be fine on Saturday, I think, and I would expect all three of those guys to probably play. Rocket maybe a little bit more of a question mark, but Sellers and Jared Brown, I would expect to play. What's up? Sorry if I butcher this. Pancho B chopping. What's up? Or Poncho? Gamecocks Barber here, just checking in. Appreciate you tuning in, boss. Appreciate it as always, and thank you for watching, as well as all of you guys that have been tuning in. Big Red says, didn't Sandstorm become a thing when we beat a top 10 Ole Miss in Willie B? Could history repeat itself? Darude should be invited to the game. I wonder where Darude is at these days. He's not from the U.S., right? So he's from, Finland? So I don't know. Maybe he's out there right now, but this would be a good time to bring him back. And, yeah, if you guys want to go to GamecockCentral.com, we actually have a story from our newest full-time writer, Kevin Miller. He wrote basically the history of that game that Big Red's talking about here, where South Carolina beat number 4 Ole Miss on a Thursday night in 2009, and that's when, notoriously speaking, Sandstorm got played, and that history just rolled on from there, and the rest is history, as they say. So, could history repeat itself? Possibly. Wouldn't shock me if it did. I really do think South Carolina has a good chance to win this game, but we're gonna have to see. And Darude should be invited to the game. I would be down with that. He brought really good vibes last year to the Kentucky game, and Sandstorm was born. Yeah, and you said I was there when Ole Miss came in. Yeah, I was. That's awesome, man. I was 9 years old, I think, at the time, and getting ready to watch the Yankees in the playoffs, and hopefully the Yankees can go to the World Series this year and finally win it for the first time in 15 years. So funny how history just adds up like that. And Christopher says, I disagree. I think it's just a case of withholding that info from Ole Miss, finding out until it's time. Exactly. There's no reason. Again, like I made the point earlier about, let's say hypothetically Lane Kiffin told Shane Beamer, hey, Jackson Dart is not playing on Saturday. Why would anyone ever do that? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to give your opponent the edge. And I definitely do think that, Shane knows what's up. Why would he reveal it all? You know what I mean? Like, there's no point in telling your opponent, like, hey, on the press conference, like, hey, like, these guys, they're all going to play. Like, that's something we'll find out on Saturday for sure. So yeah, I think that is going to do it for today's episode of GC Live. Appreciate you guys all tuning in. If you have any more questions, I'll answer them if you comment within like the next minute or two. But next time I will be live is on Sunday for GC Live Sunday Reset. And Big Red says, isn't it a rule we have to give an injury report in the SEC game. Yes. So, like I said before, tonight you'll get the first SEC availability report for the South Carolina Ole Miss games. The same deal with all the other schools in the SEC. As long as you're playing an SEC game this week or whenever, you have to provide an availability report. If it's a non-conference game, you don't have to. So when it comes to Clemson, South Carolina doesn't have to reveal squat in an availability report. So it's not required. So that is going to do it for today's episode of GC Live. Again, I will be going live again on Sunday to recap South Carolina's game against Ole Miss. Let's hope for a Gamecock win. We'll have to see what happens. That game kicks off at 3:30 p.m. on ESPN at Williams-Brice Stadium. I will be there. Some of the other GC crew will be there. It'll be a good time, hopefully. And hopefully you guys are there and loud and proud, just like you were for the LSU game. And from my understanding, wear Garnet, as it's been, commented all over social media and stuff. I am interested to see, what does Garnet out mean for South Carolina? Does that mean just Garnet jerseys with the white helmets and white pants? Or does that mean the Garnet helmets, the Garnet pants, the Garnet jersey? Shoot, maybe Garnet cleats too. I don't know. But we're going to have to see what happens. So either way, win, loss, tie, draw, whatever you want to call it, we will be back on here for GC Live Sunday Reset. I hope all of you guys are in there too and hanging out with me. I'll have a time posted at some point leading up to Sunday, depending on what time the game ends on Saturday and stuff. And we'll see what happens. So thank you guys for all tuning in, and have a great rest of your week. And we'll see you on Saturday and Sunday.